All right, so another strategy someone offering a theodicy to address the problem of evil might use is the greater goods defense. And the greater goods defense is going to begin with this idea that there really is no truly pointless suffering. There may be suffering that we don't understand the reason for, but there is some sort of reason, these folks will say. And they might point to something like vaccines. I remember when my daughter she was probably in second grade, and she was scheduled to get some round of vaccines. I don't remember what for. And she knew this. She knew that she was going to have a shot after school one day when I picked her up, but she didn't know what day it would be. And so we must have gone, I'll bet you 2 or 3 weeks of her every day getting in my car, getting in the back seat. First question, do I have to get my shots today? No. Okay, everything's fine. So this happens for 2 or 3 weeks. And then the day comes. Do I have to get my shots? Well, complete emotional collapse. I mean, she was as distraught as her little self had ever been, right? She hadn't experienced a lot of pain and suffering in her life up to this point, and or challenge or significant fears. And this shot was a huge, huge fear for her. And to watch her just collapse all the way to the doctor. We lived in Mendocino, so it was kind of a long drive to the doctor to get these shots. And to watch her suffer like that was brutal. It was really sad. And yet, I never for a moment thought that to relieve the suffering, I should not get her vaccinated. Because I realized that it's worth it. There's a greater good that comes out of her getting vaccinated. Now, in her little mind, this made no sense. There was no justification for this shot because she's being told, hey, you need to get this shot so you don't get sick. And she's like, but I'm not sick. And how do you know I'm not? I'm going to get sick. Why do I have to have this shot? So she couldn't get her head wrapped around this. So to her, despite all of our assurances that this was not some evil conspiracy to terrify her and not something pointless, to her, this had no point and it was needless suffering. Now, folks offering this greater goods defense theodicy, they might say that there's sort of an analogous thing going on with the evil events of our world that we look at and God. And they might say, well, just like you had as a parent, a much greater understanding of the complexity of your daughter's health and the risks to her health, God has an infinitely more complex understanding of the world that we exist in and all of the events that take place. So just because we don't understand the reasons for this evil doesn't mean it's not without point. They might also offer this, that to have goodness requires that there be some amount of evil. That these terms are sort of complementary to one another. And you might even think about in your own life how the challenges that you've experienced and the suffering that you've experienced has probably made you more aware of and more appreciative of the good things in your life, the things that you're grateful for. You're probably more grateful for because of the tough times you've endured. Okay, and so this is, again, is this the greater goods defense? If you want to have an enriched, deep understanding of actual goodness, you've got to have some badness to go along with it. If it was just all good all the time, what does good even mean? They're going to argue. And they might even point to something like this, that when you face unnecessary suffering that you just can't explain away, that really causes us to bond with others, humans and other animals, who are having these experiences. We develop these capacities for things like compassion and empathy and sympathy. In fact, they would probably say it's because of evil the existence of evil, that we develop a lot of the character qualities that we have, loyalty, honesty. That these are things that we develop as a part of our character because we have faced real challenges in the world that didn't always make a whole lot of sense. Now, they might also offer sort of a Leibnizian. Remember, Leibniz said, look, if you think about it from God's point of view, everything that happens the way that it does because God wanted to create the best of all possible worlds and wouldn't have created any world other than that. So despite all the crappy stuff you see going on with genocides and all these other things, and despite how terrible and horrific it looks to us, there's a bigger sort of thing at work here, and you just can't understand it. So you got to think about it from the God's eye point of view. Think about it like I'm the parent of the kid who's getting the vaccine, and I can see how things appear to my kid, but I know what's actually going on. And somebody offering this greater goods defense might do that as well. And so we look at things like the Vulture and the Little Girl. If you don't know the story, it's a really horrific one. This little girl was traveling. I can't remember which country it was, but was traveling to an aid station to get food, and she collapsed right before she got close to the aid station, and a vulture came down and was poised to eat her once she had died. And so this picture was very famous. I mean, it was hugely famous. And the little girl did make it to the aid stand, but the photographer who took the picture got so much crap that he took the picture rather than help the little girl, right, and pick her up. That he ended up killing himself. So you think about all the things that are in this involved in this situation. We've got, this little girl is just one person who's who's having to suffer through this just horrific experience of famine and warfare. And now you have this photographer who's attempting to document this horror, and then he gets his own horror and ends up killing himself. And you think about all the just horrific things that this event involves. And it's hard to take the Leibnizian view and say, like, well, it's just kind of the way the world is. We might not understand it. But then you turn around and you think, like, well, gosh, this event, it did alert the world. It rallied the world in a lot of ways around what was going on here that was human created. And human beings created this situation, and it brought this to the world's attention. And maybe Leibniz would say, yeah, so ultimately there was a greater good that came out of this, even though it's awful and sad and we can't explain it.